Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to class this morning. As we get started today, we're going to be talking about Module 4 stuff. So we'll tell you, a little bit more of information about all of that. We'll get started with some announcements today. Right, so first announcement, big announcement. Module 3 ends today. So since Module 3 was kind of in between two live streams, I put up those two extra videos in the announcements at the start of the Module 3 start date. So you want to go back in the announcements if you haven't watched those yet and watch those videos. We look at kind of the history of the internet, and we look at, the basics of how the internet works. And that second one especially is going to be important to you as you're completing your Module 3 assignments. What I ask you to do is I ask you to make a map of essentially how internet traffic flows. What happens between you putting in the URL in your browser and you getting that website back to you. And we're actually going to see an example here in a little bit. So if you're watching this before completing that today, you might be in a little bit better shape. You get a little bit of a heads up, because I'm going to be showing you an example of kind of what I'm looking for just with email traffic instead of standard web traffic. And so we did those videos. They were put out I believe it was last Thursday, or maybe it was Wednesday. Don't quite remember. Yeah, it was Wednesday. It was last Wednesday we put those out when Module 3 started. And now Module 3 ends today. So you want to make sure that you get your Module 3 assignments in by 11:59 p.m. tonight. That's one of the hard things about the summer semester, right, is that we have a 10-week class, whereas we would normally be doing this over the course of either 14 or 16 weeks, depending on the delivery method you were taking. So a 10-week class is a whole lot shorter, so we have to kind of deal with some time differences and such as far as all that goes. So Module 4 officially starts tomorrow, right? But we're going to go ahead and talk about Module 4 material today. Another announcement is that everything that's been submitted so far for Modules 1 and 2 has been graded. If you submitted something in either Module 1 or Module 2 that has not been graded yet, be on the lookout for an email from me. I need something additional from you in order for me to be able to grade that. If you've submitted something already for Module 3, or you went ahead and worked ahead in Module 4, it's not been graded yet. I typically don't grade assignments until after the due date. That way, we kind of keep academic honesty up. Nobody's... somebody submits early, they get all the right answers, and then they turn around and share that with everybody. We don't really want that to happen, so that's why I wait until after the due date to grade things. So let's see here. Module 3 is up. Module 3 is due today. Make sure to go back and watch that Module 3 video material from the announcements last week. Module 4 starts tomorrow. We're covering Module 4 material in our online class today. And of course, as always, if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. So we're covering Module 4 material today. Module 4 is about email, and specifically cloud-based email and calendars, because that's typically what you're going to be using. If you're using some kind of standard desktop application for email, like if you're using a standalone Outlook desktop application, it's going to work essentially the same as the cloud-based service anyway. So it's not a whole big deal, right? Like, you should be able to handle it after learning a little bit more about cloud email. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about email, what email is, how email works. We're going to do a few demonstrations about how to do a few certain simple things with our email. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about email etiquette, because I think that's something that a lot of people can use. I know several of you have been sending me emails, and I'm like, these people need to learn a little bit more email etiquette. So we're going to talk about tips for writing an effective email. So again, that's a little bit more about what email is, how it works. We'll do some demonstrations with a cloud email service, just so you can see some things. And we'll talk about writing an effective email etiquette, and how we can write an email that people will be more likely to read. So that is the plan for our live stream today. So first, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to talk about exactly what is email. And so as we talked about previously, if you watch those videos that we put out last time, email is the first application built for the internet, or technically in that time it was ARPANET. Remember we talked about how people on different nodes, people at different parts of the country wanted to be able to communicate quickly and easily with one another. And so they created this email application. So email is the first application built for the internet, and we still use it today. It's still vital today. Right? Like if you're going to be in business somewhere, you're going to be using email regardless of what type of business it is. Right? If you want a job in the year 2021, you're going to be using email at some point in that job or around that job. So having an understanding of email is pretty critical, and a lot of you probably have already been using email. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about are, more of the specifics about certain things, and about, kind of how to take full advantage of email. And so as it says here, email, or electronic mail, when we talk about email, that's essentially what the E stands for, electronic mail, allows one person to send a message to another through the internet. And so we can look at this in relation to regular mail, the mail that you get in your mailbox, right? Somebody sends you a letter, it travels through the networks, through the post offices and through different people's hands. And finally, it gets to you, where you can open it up and read it. And so email, just like regular mail, is a form of what we call asynchronous communication. You can have synchronous communication, or you can have asynchronous communication. Synchronous communication involves two active parties talking back and forth to one another. So if you're talking to someone in person, or you're talking to someone on the phone, that is synchronous conversation. The other person has to be there, they have to be involved in order to get the message and to give you one back. But with email, what we're talking about is asynchronous communication outside of time. So I can send you an email, it can sit in your email box for a day, 2 days, however long, right? You get it when you log into your email and you send something back to me. And so there's a lot of things nowadays that are asynchronous communication. Text messaging is asynchronous communication. Things like Teams. Teams is asynchronous communication. You can put a message in, and it's going to stay there until somebody checks it and gets it later. And so that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about asynchronous communication. Regular mail is asynchronous communication. I send a letter, you don't have to be there to get the message. It's going to go through the postal system. You're going to get it. The same thing with email. Right? But another thing about email versus the regular mail is you have to know somebody's address. Right? And in order to send an email, you have to know somebody's address. Just the address is a little bit different than the address to your house. Right? You all have email addresses. Since you are a student of Cleveland Community College, by default, you have an email address, whether you've created your own account or not. Right? You have an email address. And that essentially is the identifier of your mailbox. That's kind of like your house address or your post office box address. That's the identifier for you in terms of where your mail is going to go so it can get to you. And so let's take a look at an email address, shall we? Email address, and you've probably seen something like this before. We have here a little fake student email address. I'm a student at my.clevelandcc.edu. You all have a student email address, whatever yours is. And essentially there are two parts to an email address, and they are separated by our @ symbol here in the middle. The first part we have is our username. And so the username is the part that goes before that @ symbol. Now, calling this a username in certain contexts is going to be a little bit confusing because when you go to certain websites to log in and things like that, your username to log into that website is your entire email address. However, in context here with what we're talking about for an email address specifically, your username for that email is the part that is before that @ symbol. So in this case here, we have I'm a student. I'm a student at my.clevelandcc.edu. The username here is I'm a student, and we've outlined it here with our curly braces. And then we have the domain name. The domain name is going to be the part after that @ symbol. And this domain name identifies where that email server is located in order for mail to kind of travel along the pathways and get to you. So whenever you have this email address, you have your username and you have your domain name. And we can kind of look at this similarly more to, I think, a post office box. If any of you have post office boxes, you can kind of think about this as more of a post office box, right? Like if your post office, where your post office box is located, is like the domain name here, right? That's identifying a server that is managing a bunch of different email accounts. So when you go into the post office and you see those walls and walls of post office boxes, you can think of the post office itself as your domain, as the domain name, as the home of all of these post office boxes. And then as you're looking on all of these post office boxes in the post office, you see a little number on all the boxes. 100, 105, whatever it is, you know? And this is more like your username. This is the specific box where that mail is going. So in this instance, we have our domain name. We have our post office where we're sending our mail. So in this instance, the post office that our email is being sent to is the my.clevelandcc.edu server. And then once it gets there, it's going to look through all of the email addresses, all of those usernames, to find the particular one that it's going to so it can be put into that mailbox. So in this case, it's going to be looking for I'm a student. And so we can see this kind of breakdown here. And so this here is the kind of thing that I'm looking for the How the Web Works map that you're doing as a Module 3 assignment. It's this type of thing. The path, in that case, we're looking at the path that it takes for a website. You know, once you put in the URL into the URL bar at the top of your browser, what happens between there and you getting a website back. And in this instance, what we're looking at here is the path that an email takes. And we can see here that this person has kind of used their email service server in sort of the same way, right? Like we have a big box here with a bunch of little boxes on it. Well, these are essentially the steps that it takes for email to travel from one user to another. So you create your email using an email program or using a cloud-based email application. Your email is then sent out, right? It's being sent out based on your domain name, right? So if you're using your CCC student email address, it's going out via the my.clevelandcc.edu domain outgoing server. If you're using a Gmail account, it's using the Gmail outgoing server. Whatever, you got to have this server to send this message out, right? It's kind of like, we were looking at last week when we were looking at how the internet works. You put in that request to get that website. It sends the message to a server that's going to look for the server that has that domain name or the server that has that website on it, right? So that's essentially what's happening here. You're creating an email, you're sending it out, it's going from your computer to your email provider domain's outgoing server. Then it gets routed through the internet. It has to hop node to node to get to that incoming server. And this is where, it really works essentially a lot like what you've discovered the internet works like to get you websites. Software on the outgoing server is going to determine the best route for that message to jump from point to point to point as it tries to find the incoming server for the domain name you're sending it to. And then the other user gets it. And so that's pretty important. That's pretty critical. Is to have this understanding of how email works, what it's doing when it's doing the thing. Right? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do some demonstrations. We've got some demonstrations that we're going to do here. The first one, we're going to compose an email and we're going to send it back and forth. So what I have here is I have a little demonstration email account. Let me pull that up here so you can see that, and I'll go full screen so we can get this. All right. So this is our demonstration email account here. It's fresh. It's brand new. It's had everything wiped out of it. No messages. It is an Outlook email account. So it's going to be really similar to your Cleveland Community College student email account. For example, let's take another aside here really quickly. On your apps panel, remember I have a lot more apps than you do because I'm a faculty member, I'm a teacher, but you also have this email icon here. And when you click that, that's going to take you to your student email. And your student email at Cleveland Community College is Microsoft based. It is Azure Outlook based. So your clevelandcc.edu, your myclevelandcc.edu email address is going to look a whole lot like what we have here with our example outlook.com email address. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new message, and I'm going to use this new message to email myself. So I'm going to do this quite simply. A lot of the modern email applications have made this easy for us, right? So once I'm in here, I'm going to click this new message button, nice and big here at the top. I can click new message. Let me zoom back out. And it's going to give me a window here where I can make my message. Now we have our to field. That's where we need to put that email address that we know. We have this CC and BCC field here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We have this subject line here, which we'll talk about the importance of a subject line a little bit later. And we have this message box here where we can write our message. And then our send button down here at the bottom with some different options to send now or send later. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the email address. And I'm going to type in the username and then the domain. I'm going to send an email to myself, to my college email. So I'm going to send it to ramsey.d@clevelandcc.edu. And so that's critical here, right? Your student email address, the domain name is different from faculty and staff email addresses. Your student email address, your domain is my.clevelandcc.edu, but mine, since I'm a faculty member, is just clevelandcc.edu. That's my domain. And then my username is here, Ramsey D. So now I can add my subject line. It's important to add these subject lines. We'll just call this subject line, since we're not talking about the importance of subject lines yet. We'll just call this one example email, and I can just type it in there right like that. And then once I get into the body of my email address, or in the body of my email here where I can compose my message, I can just type, this is an example email, please reply. And we will send that. And so now I've sent it. It's going from the Outlook.com server, which is the domain for this email, traveling through the internet, getting routed all around to find the clevelandcc.edu domain. And I just received it. So let me pop it out here. Here it is. This is the example email I just received. This is the CIS 110 demo account at Outlook.com. Our username and our domain there. And we received that email. So so this window here is my clevelandcc.edu email. And this back here is my demo email. So now I can take this and I can reply to it by clicking the reply button. You can see that it added the reply to my subject line here, and it's replying to the email address that it was sent from. I'm just going to give it a little thanks and send that. And now that thanks is doing the reverse process. It's going from the clevelandcc.edu domain, getting routed all through the internet, back to the Outlook.com domain, and we just saw it pop up there. So now we can have a look at this email here, and we can click on that. It's going to open in our read pane. And we see my message, thanks. And we can also see all this information here. I didn't type all of that information. That information is called a signature, where it has my name and my position and where I work at, and where the address of Cleveland Community College and all this kind of stuff. That's called a signature. And so this is a sign-off for your email. This is, kind of like putting a sign-off at the bottom of a letter. Right? And so you might not want to type all of this every single time. So you're going to let your email handle it. So now I'm going to add a signature to my email here. So in order to do that, we have this little gear here in the upper right-hand corner of our page. If you're using Gmail, it's going to be there similarly, right? And I'm going to click the settings gear here at the upper left-hand or upper right-hand portion of the page, and that's going to bring up my settings. And so by default, I get a few little settings here. Right, like I have dark mode that I can toggle, whether or not I want to use my focused inbox, and really I don't really like focused inbox, so I'm going to turn that off. How I want my email messages spaced, whether I want them kind of spaced out where I can have more information as I look at them, or what have you. The conversation view, whether I want the newest at the top of my list or the newest at the bottom of my list, which having the newest on top makes the most sense, so we'll do that. Where you want your read pane to be, whether you want it to be on the right, which it currently is, whether you want it to be on the left, or it doesn't have the option for left here. Show on the bottom, whether you want it to be on the bottom of the screen. I can toggle that really quickly to show you what that looks like. So my email is up here, and then instead of reading it on the side, you read it on the bottom. I prefer it on the right. And then we have this at the bottom here that's view all Outlook settings. And again, Gmail is similar to this, right? We're looking at Outlook in this example because that's most similar to your student email account, but Gmail is similar. So I'm going to click View All Outlook Settings here. And that's going to give me a new window. And I've got General, and I've got Mail, and I've got Calendar, and I've got People. I'm going to click General here. And just look through everything here. I got my language and time. It should set that by default for you based on where you have your account created. If I want to make it look a little different, customize my appearance, I have that option here. Whether I want to receive notifications, different categories, accessibility options for people. Whether you want to use this on mobile devices, the storage space in your email, and so on and so forth. So now in the Mail settings, I'm going to click on Mail here. We can see a bunch of other stuff that's here. And one of the things that I have is this Compose and Reply section. And that's what I'm going to click to add my signature. And my signature is here. So what I add into this box will automatically be added to any email address or any email that I send. So let's add a signature, send another email to myself, and we'll see how that works, right? So we'll call this the CIS 110 demonstration account. It's just a demo. I can add a phone number here if I want to, or whatever, right? Check the box that says automatically include my signature. On new messages that I compose, we don't really need to include signatures on forwards or replies. So we can click that. Once we have that done, we can save it. So now it'll automatically send that signature along with your email. So I'm going to close this window now and send a new email. That's new message again. And you can see that it's already added here. Now I can go in here and delete this from this particular email if I wanted to. But I don't have to, right? We'll add my we'll add the email address, we'll add a subject testing signature, and we'll add a little text in the message here, test. And we'll send it. So now it's being routed all across the internet, looking for the domain of clevelandcc.edu so we can deliver it to my box. And here we go, I have it. And here we see the test and we see the signature. Pretty cool. So if you email one person a bunch of times, one of the things that you might want to do is you might want to add them as a contact. So since I've emailed my college email address a couple times now, what I might want to do here is add myself as a contact. And we can see over here on the left-hand side of our screen, let's zoom in on it just a little bit, we have a people icon. And I can click that. And that'll bring up my contacts. And I can add a contact. So I'm going to click that. And I can add ramseyd@clevelandcc.edu. I can put my name here. You can put their phone number there. That's my office phone number. And where they work. And then just click create. And now you have a quick contact here. Or if I wanted to go through and find this person, I can go ahead and go through and click send email. So I can search through all my contacts, find the one that I wanted to send it to, just click that send email button, and it's going to create an email that's going to already be populated with their email address, where you just have to add a subject and a message, which is pretty cool. Now, the final thing that I want to have a look at here as we are doing some demonstration, I just had to check my notes there really quickly to see what else I wanted to do, is I wanted to add an event to my calendar. So, above our little people icon here, we have a little calendar icon. And again, it's going to be similar or exactly the same for other cloud email services that you use, whether you use Gmail or whatever, right? So in this instance, I'm going to click this calendar. It makes it really intuitive, really unique, really easy to use. Right? I have this calendar here, and I can add events to it. So all I have to do is find the day that I want to add an event to, click that day. It's going to pop something up. And so in here, I can add an event. I can add CIS 110 live stream. I know that's going to be today. I know that's going to be from 11 o'clock a.m. to roughly 12 o'clock p.m. I can search for a location if I want to, or I can just put something like online, because that's where we're at. Then I can actually add repeats. If I know that I'm going to do this every Monday, I can add an every week repeat. And I can add an end date. So I know this class is going to run until July the 29th. So I can say, let's put this in here every Monday until July the 29th. And you can remind me 15 minutes before it starts. And we'll click save. And so now I have a CIS 110 live stream every Monday scheduled on my calendar, and it's going to send me reminders of these CIS 110 live streams. And so if I go to July, you can see I have them all scheduled out. Pretty neat. And so this just helps you keep yourself organized. If you're not going to do it every week, if you're just going to do it on one day, you don't have to put that end date in there. Really simple, really intuitive. Just kind of helps you do what you need to do. Right, so those are demonstrations of the big things that we need to know how to do with our cloud-based email service. And again, whether you're using Outlook or whether you're using Outlook also being your CCC student email address, or you're using Gmail or whatever, everything's going to be really similar, or basically exactly the same, right? Like one of the things that I can do here is I think I might have closed it, but I think I might be able to get back in because I also created an example Gmail account. Yes, here's my example Gmail account, and we can see that we still have that settings gear up here. We're going to click that, right? We're going to click see all settings. And it's from here where we can have our signature. And let's see, that signature is going to be in... We can just look through all of these settings here. See the labels, inbox, accounts and import, filters and blocked addresses, forwarding and pop/IMAP, add-ons, chat and meet, advanced, offline, and then themes. And we can see all of... There's our signature. So we can create a new signature. Click create. And just add it into the box here the same way that we did it before. We also have access to our calendar here in the upper right. And our also over here in the left, we have access to various things. So that's Gmail for you. Essentially the same. Right? Everything's just in a little different place. So you just have to kind of poke around a little bit until you find it. Although it's going to be nicer, since it is what your student account uses, if you use your student account and use the Outlook, like we're doing here. So I'll switch back to the mailbox here, because we'll need this again in just a little bit. Right, but what I'd like to do is talk for a little bit about email etiquette and what makes an effective email. So this is important type stuff. Right, and we'll kind of run through this because we're getting a little bit late into our live stream here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but it is important. Because like I've said before, right, as you are approaching careers, you're probably going to be using email. And you want to be able to use emails properly. So the person on that other end of that email thinks you're a professional and thinks you know what you're doing. You know, so you don't come off as someone who is not good at their job or at what they're doing, because I'm sure you are proficient. So your email should reflect that. So we start off with our subject line. Email subject lines are like newspaper headlines, right? They should convey the main point of your email or the idea that you want the person that's reading your email to take away from your email. And sort of a main theme that we're going to kind of get from all of this is that the big point of email is to kind of respect people's time, right? We want to write our email in such a way that it's going to get our information across and respect that other person's time. Because that's going to make it easier on both of us. That's going to make it easier on me, and that's going to make it easier on them. Because not only are they going to know up front what kind of commitment they need to put into this email, but, you know, I might receive a better response quicker because I use these steps. So we want to treat our email subject lines like a newspaper headline. So they should convey to the reader what the point is. And so this is a mistake I see a lot, right? People just use generic little email headers. Hi, or question, or FYI. And this doesn't really tell me what the email is about or what we're going to be doing in this email. It's not informative. And it's going to more likely than not make me skip it. If your message, especially if your message is time sensitive. You might want to include a date in your subject line for that email. For example, like, oh, meeting on Thursday, December the 2nd. That way, when your reader gets it, not only do they know, oh, I got an email. They want to meet. They want to meet by December the 2nd, which it's summer, so December 2nd is a long way away, but work with me here. Imagine it's like November 27th. Right? And so take a moment, like pause the video if you want to, right? But take a moment and just think about like all the different emails that you see. What gets your attention the most? What is most effective? And why is that the most effective? It's about respecting people's time. It's about making sure things are handled in a way that they need to be handled. It's all of this. Right? So let's head back over to our demo account. And let's start writing an email. And now I'm going to pretend that I'm a student in my own class. And I'm going to write a new message. And I'm going to write it to Ramsey D at clevelandcc.edu. Now I'm going to add my subject line. Now I could add something like question or, it's funny, like I had somebody email me several semesters ago and they just emailed me with the subject line of help. Doesn't tell me a whole lot, right? I want to convey as much information in as little space as possible. So what I want to do is I want to let the person I'm emailing know up front what's going on. So in this case, since I know it's about a class and they're my instructor, I can include my class name, CIS 110. Our summer session is section 501. That way they know right up front specifically which class this is about, right? Like during the summer, I only have one class, but, during the fall and spring, I have, 6, 7 classes. So knowing right up front which class this person is asking me a question about is super important, right? That's going to help respect my time because I'm going to see that and I'm going to know, oh, it's about that class. And so then I can add some more information like question about module 4. Right, so this gives me a lot of information as the person reading this email. I know, 1, that the person has a question, right? It says question, makes sense. I know, 2, it's about module 4. Now, I don't know necessarily what it's about in module 4, but I know that it's about module 4. And that also lets me know, 3, that there's a bit of time sensitivity to it, right? I need to answer this prior to the end of module 4, because really after module 4 is over, it doesn't matter a whole lot. So we don't have a ton of words here in our subject line, but we do have enough information to get across to whoever's reading this what's going on here. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use some kind of greeting. We're going to use some kind of greeting here. So we're going to talk about greetings, we're going to talk about sign-offs, and then we'll jump back to our demo here. We want to just greet our reader somehow. Like, you can think about this like a conversation, right? Like you don't just go up to somebody in the street and just start talking to them. You start off by saying hello or hey or how are you, right? And then at the end, when you're done talking to somebody, you say goodbye or see you later. All right, so we want to start off our email with some kind of greeting. We have some examples here. Dear Professor Smith. Hello, Miss McMahon. Hi, Mary Jane. This puts in some kind of effort, right? And not all of the time are you going to know that person's name. If you don't know that person's name, that you're emailing, like this is especially common when you are emailing for, say, a job application. If you don't know the person's name, or if you're emailing a group of people, you might want to try something that's generic but polite, like "to whom it may concern," or "dear members of the selection committee," or "hello everyone." Right? So then you're not just jumping into a conversation, you're saying hello. And we also want to likewise sign off our email. So your closing is extremely important because it lets the reader know who's contacting them. It also allows you to sign off with your name at the end of the email. So like you could just type in the message without a hello and without a goodbye. But I might not know who that is, especially if I don't know you. Especially if your email address is something random like fluffyunicorn@gmail.com. So you want to have this introduction, you want to have this sign-off. That helps you seem more friendly and seem more professional to the person that's on the other end. Now, the type of greeting that you'll use and the type of sign-off that you'll use is formal versus informal. Right? There's formality. How you address the person you're emailing is just as important as addressing them in the first place. And how you address an individual depends on your relationship with that individual. For example, if they're your friend, you could say, "Hey, Ricky," or whatever their name is. "Hey, Claire." "Hi, Ronnie," whatever. And it's fine. But if they're your instructor, if they're your boss, if they're someone you don't know, you might not want to approach it that way. You might just want to use their name, like Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Cobb, Miss Randall. You might want to tell them hello, like, "Hello, Mr. Ramsey." Or really formal would be like, "Dear Mr. Ramsey." That's probably a little too formal for that instance, but if you were emailing the CEO of a company, it might be a little bit different. If you know them personally, you can address them informally. Otherwise, you should address them formally. Good rule of thumb, if you don't know them personally, don't use their first name. Now let's look at how some of our closing lines fall on this formal versus informal. We have some really familiar, really informal lines here. They're going to be our upper right-hand portion of this. Our lower left-hand portion are going to be some of our really formal stuff. And we have everything in between here. Right? You can see, like, up here in our familiar informal section, we have things like "love" and "with love" and "THX thanks." And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to email my boss or my professor and close my email with "love." That would be weird. But it would also be really weird to be emailing your friend and close it with "warmest regards." Now, what I like to do typically, for most emails that I send, I like to fall right here in the middle. Right here in the middle is my favorite. Just a good thanks. And I think that's fine in most applications, right? It's really neutral. It doesn't really give any familiarity or unfamiliarity. In more unfamiliar, more formal settings, I might reply with a "regards." or a sincerely. Right? But a good thanks can handle a lot of issues. All right, so let's jump back to our demo account and let's write our email. So again, remember that I'm writing this as from the perspective of one of you all, a student in this class. Writing my instructor. My instructor should be a formal email. Right? So I should write something like, hello, Mr. Ramsey. And there's my introduction. Hello, Mr. Ramsey. Relatively formal, but not overly formal. Just a good, solid introduction. We'll write some kind of question here. What were you looking for when it comes to the lab assignment in Module 4? I'm trying to complete it, but I'm unsure what to do. Short, direct, to the point. Right? Not really the best example because I don't really have a specific question, but if you have a specific question, you ask a specific question. You want to try to keep it short, within 4 sentences if possible. Remember that we're trying to respect that other person's time. Then I can come down here, add my thanks before my signature. Then I can send that away. Right? Now we'll get in it. Right now it's routing through the internet, routing from domain to domain. I should receive it in my inbox shortly. Here it is. And here it is. Wonderful. Now we have another example here that I'll put up on the screen. It's a long email. In my seated classes, I like to try to read this just because it's a little bit of fun. But what I'll let us do here is I'll just let you pause this and read it yourself a little bit later on or whenever. Right? This is just an example of a good email. They have a good introduction. They have a good closing line for the situation. They have their information, as much information as they can possibly get to help them out in this situation here. They want a billing refund for a fee that was wrongfully applied to their account. So they're going ahead and putting their account number in here up front. They're going ahead and talking about what happened. There was a $200 fee that was wrongfully applied. They have a timeline of things that they asked before, like, oh, I called to request this refund at this date and this time, and I had a representative speak to me, and they told me this. I called back again. I got this other information. They're including as much information as they possibly can in this email. That way, there's no ambiguity. There's no email tag, emailing each other back and forth, asking and answering questions. They're just going ahead and laying it all out there. They're being respectful of that other person's time. Because one, that's going to help them. That's going to help them get an understanding of the situation quicker. And it's going to help the person sending this email. Because if that other person on that end can understand what's going on quicker, then they can understand what's wrong and give him his refund faster. Absolutely critical. So let's finish this by talking about carbon copy and blind carbon copy, or CC and BCC. We had a look at that in our demo email application here as we were sending our emails. Right? We saw when we click to send a new message, we have a CC and a BCC that we can add to our message here. and that stands for carbon copy and blind carbon copy. And so copying individuals on an email is a good way to send your message to the main recipient of the email, that person in that to field, while also sending someone else a copy at the same time. So this can be useful if you want to convey the exact same information to more than one person. Now, one thing to note here is that when you send a message to more than one address using that carbon copy field, or CC field, both the original recipient and all of the other recipients of the carbon copies can see everybody who you've emailed, all the email addresses in the to and CC fields. So each person who receives the message will be able to see the addresses of everyone else who received it and respond. But what if you don't want them to be able to do that? Well, that's where we get the blind carbon copy. Blind copying emails to a group of people can be useful when you don't want everyone on the list to have each other's email address. The only recipient address that will be visible to all recipients is the one that's in the to field. However, we don't want to assume that blind copying will always keep recipients from knowing who else was copied. Someone who is blind copied might hit reply all, and if they hit reply all, they send that message to everyone, and that reveals that they were in on the original message. And so here's a nice little example I like to do here. We have this to field. In this to field here, that's the main recipient of the email. That's Brad here. In our CC field, we have Maggie. So the person sending this, which is Kevin, wanted both Brad and Maggie to know this information. And they wrote here, "Don't tell John I said so, but I think he deserves a huge raise." Well, don't tell John he said so, but he also blind carbon copied John, which means John's going to get this message too and know that Brad and Maggie have been told by Kevin how Kevin thinks he needs a big raise. And so this makes it kind of seem like, well, maybe John and Kevin are in cahoots. They're working together to try to get John a raise. And Brad and Maggie would never know about John's involvement unless John hit that reply all button and revealed his involvement to the group. So if he wants to keep it on the low, that he's involved and him and Kevin are working together to try to get him more money, he wants to keep that quiet and just let it go. Don't reply, or at least don't reply all. So those are the big things that I want you to get out of Module 4. So we've looked at various things here. We've looked at what email is, how email works, how it basically the path that an email follows to get from the sender to the receiver. We demonstrated different things that we can do with our email. We demonstrated writing a good email. We demonstrated adding a signature. We demonstrated adding things to our calendar. We demonstrated adding contacts. And we talked about a lot of different things to make an email more efficient and more effective, to get our message across quickly and easily, and to respect the time of the person on the other end. That's a lot of stuff to do in 1 hour, but it has been 1 hour. So we'll go ahead and wrap up our live stream for now. Remember, Module 3 assignments due tonight. Please get those in. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to hang out in the chat for a minute, just in case anybody here with me live has any questions. That's all that I have for you for today's live stream, though. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.